right. When there are alternatives available, you know, Yudhishthira, that if one can have all their desires fulfilled without effort, they will hardly choose to act at all, far less engage in war. Yudhishthira nodded thoughtfully, his eyes never leaving Sanjaya's face. Yes, I do believe that peace is the better path. But what of those who are unfortunate? They may not enjoy the simple pleasures of life. Music, garlands, scents, or fine clothes, and yet we have been driven from our kingdom by Dhritarashtra's son, Duryodhana. Sanjaya nodded sympathetically, his expression somber. The king is in trouble, O prince, and seeks protection in the might of others. This is not wise. Let him receive from others the same behavior he displays towards them. Yudhishthira's eyes narrowed, a hint of anger creeping into his voice. Duryodhana disregarded the words of Vidura, our well-wisher and advisor. His father, Dhritarashtra, chose to follow his son's counsel, even when it led to unrighteous actions. The king is blinded by his love for Duryodhana, who is consumed by envy and wrath. As Yudhishthira spoke, his words poured out like a river, each sentence building on the last to paint a picture of the cursed downfall. Vidura's wisdom was ignored, and now our kingdom lies in ruins. The counselors of Duryodhana are men of little worth. Dasasana, Sakanai, and Karna. They have led us down this path, and I fear it is too late to turn back. Sanjaya listened intently, his eyes never leaving Yudhishthira's face. He knew the prince's words were laced with pain and sorrow, but also with a deep sense of justice. Yudhishthira's voice rose in a crescendo of emotion as he spoke of Arjuna, the greatest warrior of their time. Arjuna is unmatched in his skill with the bow. Duryodhana knows this, yet still he believes it possible to rob us of our sovereignty. He has not yet. The sun was setting over the kingdom, casting a warm orange glow over the assembly gathered before Arjuna. Sanjaya, wise advisor to the Pandavas, stood tall, his eyes locked onto the prince's face. As he began to speak, O Pandava, Sanjaya said, his voice filled with compassion and concern, the world has heard of your righteous conduct. I see it too, O son of Pritha. Life is fleeting, and its end can be shrouded in great infamy. Considering this, you should not perish. If without war the Kurus will not yield your share, I think it is far better for you to live upon alms in the kingdom of the Anakas and Vrishas than obtain sovereignty by war. Sanjaya's words hung in the air as he paused, his gaze piercing into Arjuna's soul. This mortal existence is but a short period, prone to blame, subject to constant suffering, and unstable. It is never comparable to a good name. Therefore, O Pandava, never perpetrate a sin. The assembly was silent, mesmerized by Sanjaya's words. He continued, his voice filled with conviction. It is the desires that adhere to mortal men an obstruction to a virtuous life. A wise man should kill them all beforehand, and thereby gain the stainless fame in the world. A son of Pritha. Sanjaya's eyes seemed to see right through Arjuna as he spoke of the futility of seeking wealth at the cost of virtue. The thirst after wealth is but like fetter in this world. The virtue of those that seek it is sure to suffer. He is wise who seeks virtue alone. Desires being increased, a man must suffer in his temporal concerns. As Sanjaya spoke, he seemed to conjure up images from Arjuna's past. You have studied the Vedas, lived the life of a saintly Brahmin, performed sacrificial rites, and made charities to Brahmanas, even remembering the highest position attainable by beings. You have devoted your soul for years and years to the pursuit of pleasures. Sanjaya's voice was tinged with sadness as he spoke of the consequences of indulging in pleasures without practicing meditation. He who devotes himself excessively to the pleasures and joys of life never employeth himself in the practice of religious meditation, must be exceedingly miserable. His joys forsake him after his wealth is gone, and his strong instincts goad him on towards his wanted pursuit of pleasure. The assembly was transfixed by Sanjaya's words, as if they were witnessing a revelation unfold before their eyes. He spoke of the deeds that would precede Arjuna in the world to come, and how those deeds would determine his fate. Your work is celebrated by all as comparable to that food savory and dainty which is. The sun was setting over the vast expanse of the Kurukshetra, casting a warm orange glow over the assembled warriors. Yudhishthira, the eldest of the Pandava brothers, sat in contemplative silence, his eyes fixed on the wise and venerable Sanjaya. The sage's words had struck a chord within him, and he sought to clarify the path forward. Sanjaya, you speak the truth, Yudhishthira. Again his voice low and measured. Righteous deeds are indeed the cornerstone of our actions. But how do we discern virtue from vice when they masquerade as each other, when the seasons of distress ripen our means of living are threatened? It becomes increasingly difficult to distinguish between what is right and wrong. Sanjaya listened intently, his eyes reflecting the wisdom of the ages. Amsa, he murmured, using the ancient word for non-violence is a concept that transcends the mundane world. It requires discrimination. Yudhishthira, to distinguish between what is ordained and what is not. Yudhishthira nodded thoughtfully. I see your point, Sanjaya. In times of plenty, we must adhere to our duties as prescribed by our order, but when the means of living are scarce, we should seek alternative means to discharge those duties. And yet if one is destitute, it is not virtuous to abandon all sense of duty. The air was heavy with the weight of Yudhishthira's words. Sanjaya leaned forward, his eyes burning with the deep understanding. Krisha, the great sage and counselor, has taught us that in times of distress we must adapt our actions according to the situation, but we should not confuse adaptation with abandonment of duty. As if on cue, Krisha himself appeared at Yudhishthira's side, his presence radiating an aura of calm and wisdom. My dear Yudhishthira, he said, his voice soothing as a summer breeze, I have counseled many kings to seek the welfare of both sides in conflict, and I have watched as those who follow my counsel, Sayakai, the Chetas, the Vrishnis, and others, have emerged victorious, their hearts filled with joy and their spirits unbroken. Yudhishthira's eyes widened as he listened to Krisha's words. He had always known that the sage was a master of strategy and diplomacy, but now he saw him in a new light, as a guide on the path of righteousness. Krisha, Yudhishthira said, his voice filled with reverence, you are the great judge of all acts. Your counsel is like a beacon in the darkness, illuminating the path forward. I seek your guidance now, for I must decide whether to abandon the duties. In the midst of a tumultuous era, Krisha shared his deepest concerns with Sanjaya, his trusted advisor. I desire, Krisha said, that the sons of Pandu may not be ruined, that they may prosper and attain their wishes. He prayed for the prosperity of King Dhritarashtra's many sons as well, for it was Krishna's wish to guide them towards peace. Krishna explained to Sanjaya that he had always believed in the importance of peace, especially for those who wielded power. But he noted with a hint of sadness, the sons of Pandu displayed an exemplary, peaceful disposition. In contrast, Dhritarashtra's sons were consumed by covetousness and ambition. Krishna wondered why Sanjaya couldn't see that hostility was inevitable given their behavior. Sanjaya, however, seemed unconvinced. He countered with a philosophical argument, setting the opinions of various Brahmanas on the nature of success in this world and the next. Some believed that success depended on work, while others thought that knowledge alone could bring salvation. Krisha listened attentively to Sanjaya's words, but gently pointed out that those who relied solely on knowledge without action were like a person with a map but no food. They might know where to go, but their hunger would remain unfulfilled. Krisha then began to weave a tapestry of examples from the gods themselves. Indra, the mighty king of the gods, had attained his position through self-discipline and hard work. Similarly, Vrihaspati, the wise preceptor of the celestials, had reached his station by following the path of austerity and self-control. Even the constellations in the heavens were a testament to the power of work, for they too had achieved their positions through diligent effort. Krishna's words flowed like a river, carrying Sanjaya along with them. He emphasized that the rule followed by the best of Brahmanas, Kshatriyas, and Vaisyas was one of study, austerity, and work combined. Sanjaya, wise as he was, should know this. Krisha said. Krishna then turned to the question at hand, whether it was proper for the king to fight or not. He asked Sanjaya to consider the division of the 4 castes and their respective duties. A Brahmana's duty was to study, offer sacrifices, and teach. A Kshatriya's duty was to protect his people and uphold justice. A Vaisya's duty was to earn wealth through commerce and agriculture, while a Sidra's duty was to serve the higher castes. Krishna concluded by saying that the king should protect all the castes with care, setting them to perform their respective duties. He should be impartial and just, never giving in to sensual desires or covetousness. But Krishna noted with a hint of sadness that Kuras had forgotten these. As the sun began to set on the kingdom of Hastinapura, Sanjaya stood before King Yudhishthira, his eyes filled with a mix of sadness and respect. He took his leave, his voice trembling slightly as he spoke his final words. To the king, O divine ruler of men, Sanjaya said, I bid you farewell. May prosperity be yours. Always. He paused, taking a deep breath. Before continuing, I hope I have not spoken out of turn or caused offense with my words. I wish to depart. Now, and may peace and happiness be your Yudhishthira's expression, softened as he listened to Sanjaya's words. He nodded graciously, his voice filled with warmth. Permitted by us, O Sanjaya. Take your leave. Peace to thee. You are a person of pure heart, always thinking well of us. Your words are like nectar, soothing and gentle. Sanjaya bowed his head in gratitude, his eyes shining with tears. He knew that he was leaving behind not only the king, but also his friends and comrades in arms, Arjuna, Emma, Nakilas, Ahadeva, Chinartma, Satyaki, and Chikitana. He took one last look at Yudhishthira before turning to depart. Sanjaya walked out of the palace. He felt a sense of duty wash over him. The king had entrusted him with a special mission to spread the news of his well-being among the people of Hastinapura and to inquire about their welfare. Sanjaya knew that this was no small task, but he was determined to complete and made his way through the bustling streets of the city, greeting friends and acquaintances along the way. He visited the Brahmanas who lived in the woods, the ascetics who dwelt in solitude, and the elderly sages who had spent their lives studying the Vedas. Sanjaya spoke words of kindness and respect to each one, asking about their well-being and sharing news of Yudhishthira's peace. Next, he visited the palace, where he met with the king's preceptors and advisors, Drona, Aswatthama, Kripa, and Vidura. He saluted them in Yudhishthira's name, touching their feet and speaking words of respect. Sanjaya also inquired about the welfare of Sayodhana, Dhritarashtra's eldest son. Despite his wicked nature as he continued on his mission, Sanjaya met with other notable figures in the kingdom: Samadatta, who was a wise and just leader; Chitrasna, the master of this game; Sakanai, the king of the Gandharas; Karna, the mighty warrior; and Vidura, the wise counselor. He spoke words of kindness to each. In the midst of their exile, Yudhishthira, the eldest son of Pandu, called upon Sanjaya, his trusted advisor and chronicler of the Bharata dynasties, his story with a deep sense of concern and a desire to avoid conflict. Yudhishthira asked Sanjaya to convey a message to their uncle Dhritarashtra, the blind king of Hastinapura. Tell him, O Sanjaya, Yudhishthira said with conviction, that we are all under the control of the Supreme Lord. He is the one who imparts knowledge to the child, and childish as to the learned according to his own will. Yudhishthira then instructed Sanjaya to tell Dhritarashtra about their strength and how they were living happily due to his prowess. It was through your grace, O repressor of foes, Yudhishthira said, that we children of tender years obtained the kingdom. Sanjaya listened intently as Yudhishthira continued, having first bestowed a kingdom on us. You should not now be indifferent to us. Destruction would then overtake us. Yudhishthira emphasized the importance of unity among their family members and urged Sanjaya to convey this message to Dhritarashtra. We wish to live united, he said firmly. Do not suffer yourself to be vanquished by foes. Sanjaya, prepared to leave Yudhishthira, reminded him to salute Bhishma, the grandsire of the Paratas and a revered figure in their family. Vayu, when Santana's race was about to become extinct, Yudhishthira said with gratitude, it was revived. Therefore, O sire, do that according to your own judgment, by which your grandsons may all live in amity with one another. Sanjaya was also instructed to counsel peace from Vidura, the wise and compassionate advisor of the Kuras. Yudhishthira then turned his attention to Duryodhana, the unyielding prince who had caused him so much suffering, the insults. You offered to innocent and helpless Drupada in the midst of the assembly. Yudhishthira said with restraint, we will quietly bear simply, because we have no mind to see the Kuras slain. Sanjaya listened attentively as Yudhishthira recounted their suffering at the hands of Duryodhana and his brothers. They had been exiled dressed in deer skins, and Dasesana had dragged Krishna, disregarding Kantai's honor. Yet despite all this, Yudhishthira urged Sanjaya to convey a message of peace and unity to Dhritarashtra. Must have our proper share of the kingdom, Yudhishthira said with conviction. As Sanjaya, a devoted servant of the Kauravas, departed from the Pandavas' camp, he couldn't help but feel a sense of trepidation. He had been tasked by Dhritarashtra to convey the news of their victory at this and the subsequent exile of his 5 sons to the forest. With a heavy heart, Sanjaya began his arduous journey back to Hastinapura, the royal capital. As he entered the city, Sanjaya made his way to the palace gates, where he was greeted by the porter. The gatekeeper, aware of Sanjaya's importance, quickly relayed the news to Dhritarashtra, who was seated on his throne surrounded by his advisors and family members. Upon hearing that Sanjaya had arrived with a message from the Pandavas, Dhritarashtra's curiosity was piqued. But Sanjaya, having been granted permission to enter the palace, approached Dhritarashtra with joined hands in reverence. He began to speak of his encounter with Yudhishthira, who had inquired about the king's well-being and that of his family. Sanjaya recounted how Yudhishthira spoke of his desire for virtue and wealth without resorting to any dishonorable means. The wise prince also expressed his concern for the welfare of Dhritarashtra's sons and grandsons, as well as their friends and advisors. Dhritarashtra, however, seemed oblivious to the gravity of the situation. He inquired about Yudhishthira's intentions and whether he was happy with his brothers and counselors. Sanjaya's response solely served to highlight the king's own shortcomings. The wise old man spoke candidly, pointing out Dhritarashtra's numerous mistakes and the consequences that would soon unfold. Sanjaya began by describing Yudhishthira as a paragon of virtue, who had renounced all sinful deeds. Just as a serpent sheds its worn-out skin, he warned Dhritarashtra that his own actions were contrary to both Dharma, religion, and Artha, profit, and would ultimately lead to misery in this life and the next. Sanjaya emphasized the importance of controlling one's senses and desires, citing the example of King Valai, who had realized the eternal essence as the cause of all things. As the conversation continued, Sanjaya highlighted the Kauravas' own downfall, which he attributed to their advisors' unwavering dedication to their cause. He predicted that the destruction of the Kauravas was inevitable, and that Yudhishthira's patience would ultimately lead to their demise. Dhritarashtra, however, remained steadfast in his resolve, convinced that his son Ajatasattu would prevail. Sanjaya concluded by expressing his own fatigue from the long journey and seeking permission to retire for the night. As he departed, he warned in the grand hall of the palace, King Dhritarashtra, a ruler renowned for his wisdom, sat deep in thought. His eyes, though shrouded by darkness, burned with an inner fire as he pondered the weighty matters of state. The king's mind was consumed by the impending arrival of Sanjaya, who had recently returned from the Pandavas and would soon reveal to the court the message of Ajatasattu. As Dhritarashtra sat lost in contemplation, his orderly in waiting approached him with a gentle reverence. "Your Majesty," he said softly, "the king's messenger has arrived with news of Vidura's arrival at your command." The king's eyes snapped into focus as he replied, "Let Vidura enter my chambers. I am always eager to receive the wise and venerable Kshetra." The orderly hastened out to summon Vidura, who had been waiting patiently in the antechamber. As he entered Dhritarashtra's chambers, Vidura bowed his head in respect and joined his hands together in a gesture of devotion. "O mighty king," he said, "I have arrived at your behest. If there is any matter that requires my attention for counsel, I am here to serve." Dhritarashtra rose from his throne, his movements slow but deliberate, and approached Vidura with an air of expectation. "A wise Kshetrite," he began, "Sanjaya has returned bearing the message of Ajatasattu. My mind is consumed by anxiety as I ponder the implications of this news. Tell me, what can a person do to alleviate the burning sensation that afflicts my heart and prevents me from sleeping?" Vidura listened attentively to the king's words before responding with a gentle smile. "Sleeplessness, your Majesty, affects those who are consumed by greed, those who have lost all their wealth, or those who have failed in their endeavors. I hope that none of these afflictions has befallen you." Dhritarashtra shook his head, his brow furrowed with concern. "No, wise Kshetrite," he replied, "my troubles are not of this world. It is the weight of Sanjaya's message and my own doubts that plague me." He paused for a moment before continuing, "I desire to hear words of wisdom from you, Vidura. You alone possess the qualities of virtue and intelligence that make you revered by all wise men." Vidura bowed his head in respect as he began to speak. "Your Majesty," he said, "King Yudhishthira is a just ruler worthy of being the sovereign of the three worlds. Yet despite his many virtues, it was you who exiled him from your kingdom. You possess qualities that are opposite to those of the Pandava prince, yet you still cling to power." The king's eyes dropped in shame. The sun had just begun to rise over the kingdom of Hastinapura, casting a warm glow over the throne room. Dhritarashtra, the blind king, sat on his throne, his face itched with worry and concern. He turned to Vidura, his wise and learned advisor, and asked for guidance. "Tell me what I can do." Dhritarashtra said, his voice heavy with anxiety, For you alone among us are versed in both religion and prophet. Advise me wisely. O Vidura, with his magnanimous heart and deep understanding of the world, looked at the king with compassion. He knew that Dhritarashtra was struggling to come to terms with the chaos that had engulfed their kingdom. My dear King Vidura, began, even if unasked, one should speak truly. Whether their words be good or bad, hateful or pleasing, I shall tell you what is for the good of the Kuras, and what is beneficial and consistent with morality. Dhritarashtra leaned forward, eager to hear Vidura's words. Do not Uvarata, Vidura said, set your heart upon means of success that are unjust and improper. A man of intelligence must not grieve if any purpose of his does not succeed, notwithstanding the application of fair and proper means. Vidura paused, as if collecting his thoughts before continuing. Before one engages in an act, he said, one should consider the competence of the agent, the nature of the act itself, and its purpose. For all acts are dependent on these three factors. Considering these, one should begin an act and not take it up on a sudden impulse. Vidura spoke. His words painted vivid pictures in Dhritarashtra's mind. He saw the king's kingdom with its vast territories, treasuries, and populations, all interconnected like the stars in the night sky. But, O King Vidura, said the king, who knoweth not proportion for measure regarding territory gain, lost treasury, population, and punishment, cannot retain his kingdom long. He, on the other hand, who is acquainted with the measures of these as prescribed in treatises, being necessarily possessed of the knowledge of religion and prophet, can retain his kingdom. Dhritarashtra listened intently, his mind racing with thoughts of his own kingdom and its many complexities. Vidura continued to speak his words, a gentle stream that flowed through the king's troubled heart. He spoke of the importance of controlling one's senses, like an experienced charioteer guiding his horses on a peaceful journey. One's body is one's car. Vidura said, the soul within is the driver, and the senses are his steeds, drawn by those excellent steeds. When well trained, he that is wise pleasantly performed the journey of life. And in the majestic halls of Hastinapura, Dhritarashtra, the blind king, sat enthroned, his thirst for wisdom and virtue unquenched. He turned to Vidura, his trusted adviser, and said, O thou of great intelligence, tell me again words such as these, consistent with religion and prophet. My thirst for hearing them is not quenched. What you say is charming. Vidura smiled, his eyes twinkling with wisdom, and began to speak in a gentle tone. Evolution in all the holy places, and kindness to all creatures. These two are equal. Perhaps kindness to all creatures surpasseth the former. He paused for a moment before continuing. O master, show kindness unto all thy sons, for by that winning great fame in this world thou wilt have heaven hereafter. As he spoke, Vidura's mind wandered back to an ancient story, one that had been passed down through generations. It was the tale of Vairakana, a suitor from the Daitya clan, and Sudamwan, a Brahmana of great learning and virtue. The two men were vying for the hand of Kisanai, a maiden renowned for her beauty. Kisanai, determined to choose a worthy husband, had invited both Vairakana and Sudamwan to sit together in her pavilion. But when Sudamwan arrived, he refused to share a seat with Vairakana, citing the ancient traditions that governed social hierarchy. Vairakana, enraged by this slight, proposed a wager. If Sudamwan could answer a question about which they had quarreled, he would grant him his life. The two men proceeded to Prahalada's court, where they laid their wager before the great sage. Prahalada, wise and just, listened attentively as the two men posed their question. Are Brahmanas superior, or is Vairakana superior? Sudamwan spoke first, citing the ancient traditions that supported his claim. Prahalada, however, refused to take sides, saying, how can one like us answer a question about which he too have quarreled? I will not speak an untruth, even for my son. He then explained the consequences of speaking falsely. The person who misses his tongue suffers like the deserted wife, who panteth at night beholding her husband sleeping in the arms of a co-wife, like a person who hath lost it to seize. Prahalada spoke. He declared that Sudamwan was indeed superior to Vairakana. Moved by his words, Sudamwan granted Vairakana his life, but only on one condition. He would have to wash Sudamwan's feet in the presence of Vidura finished his tale, and Dhritarashtra listened intently, his heart filled with a newfound understanding. The blind.
In the ancient times, when the great Rishisvatake, son of Vatrai, was wandering in disguise as a mendicant, he encountered the deities known as Saivayas. They were perplexed by his presence. and asked him to share his wisdom with them. Svitektu, with his tranquil heart and mastery over his passions, began to speak words of great learning. He said that one should regard both pleasant and unpleasant situations equally, like one's own self, to bear silently the slanders or reproaches of others as a virtue, for it consumes the slanderer and appropriates their virtue. She cautioned against indulging in harsh and angry words, which can burn and scorch the very essence of life. A wise person should always abstain from such speech, for it pierces the heart. Like sharp arrows, Svitektu also warned that a man's character is shaped by his associations, just as a cloth takes on the color of the dye in which it is soaked. He advised against seeking company with those who are vile or low, and to avoid arrogant and ignoble behavior. Instead, one should strive for truthfulness in speech, humility in demeanor, and control over one's passions. A man who wishes prosperity for all and never sets his heart on the misery of others is considered the first among his kind. Svitektu then spoke about the characteristics of a mediocre person, one who consoles others with false words, but remains truthful in their own speech. He also described the indicators of a bad man: uncontrolled behavior, susceptibility to danger, proneness to wrath, ingratitude, and wickedness of heart. Dhritarashtra, the king, asked Vidura about the nature of high families, those that are considered noble and virtuous. Vidura replied that such families possess certain qualities, including asceticism, self-restraint, knowledge of the Vedas, sacrifices, pure marriages, and gifts of food. They also uphold good manners and conduct, avoiding falsehoods and disrespect towards Brahmanas. Vidura emphasized that even if a family is wealthy and prosperous, it will fall if its members disregard or speak ill of Brahmanas, or if they misappropriate what has been entrusted to them. He also warned against the dangers of wealth, which can come and go, but good manners and conduct are essential for true greatness. The king asked Vidura to describe the characteristics of a high family, and he replied that such families are marked by their adherence to virtues like self-restraint, knowledge, and purity. They avoid quarrels, deceit, and false behavior, and treat Brahmanas with respect. They also provide hospitality to guests, offering them reverence and kindness. Vidura then spoke about the importance of true friendship, which is built on trust, loyalty, and mutual support. He said that a true friend is one who inspires confidence like a father and can be relied upon in times.
In the midst of a grand assembly, Vidura stood before Dhritarashtra, the king of Hastinapura, with a deep sense of concern etched on his face. Vidura began to speak about the nature of humanity, son of Vichitravirya. He said, "Man of the wise sage has spoken of 7 and 10 kinds of men who are foolish in their ways. They are like those who strike empty space with their fists, or try to bend the unyielding bow of Indra in the sky." Vidura's words were filled with a sense of sorrow as he described these individuals. He who seeks to control one who is beyond his grasp, he who is content with meager gains, and he who humbly pays court to enemies. All these are examples of foolish men. He said as Vidura continued to speak, his words painted vivid pictures in the minds of those listening. He described a man who boasts of his accomplishments, one who is born into a noble family, but commits improper deeds, and another who constantly engages in hostilities with someone more powerful. These are the kinds of men who bring ruin upon themselves. Vidura said the envoys of Yama, with their nooses in hand, dried them to hell. Dhritarashtra listened intently to Vidura's words, his expression a mix of concern and curiosity. When Vidura finished speaking, Dhritarashtra asked, "Man who has been spoken of as having 100 years for the period of his life, why do not all men attain this allotted span?" Vidura's response was immediate: excess of pride, excess in speech, excess in eating, anger, and the desire of enjoyment. These 6 sharp swords cut off the period of life allotted to creatures. Dhritarashtra listened with rapt attention as Vidura continued to speak about the dangers of excessive behavior. He described how a man who appropriates another's wife or violates his preceptor's bed is guilty of slaying Brahmanas. The Vedas declare that contact with these individuals requires expiation. Vidura said, "But those who accept the teaching of the wise are acquainted with morality and live a virtuous life. They succeed in attaining to heaviness." The conversation continued. Vidura spoke about the importance of honesty and integrity in one's words and actions. He described how a man who speaks agreeable words may be abundant, but the speaker and hearer of medicinal words are rarer than man who says what is unpalatable. But truly adds to the strength of the king. Vidura said, for the sake of his family a member may be sacrificed, for the sake of his village a family may be sacrificed, and for the sake of his soul the whole earth may be sacrificed. Dhritarashtra listened with growing concern as Vidura spoke about.
In the wise words of Vidura, a revered sage, we find guidance on the path to living a virtuous life. It begins with the simple, yet profound act of welcoming an aged and venerable guest into one's home as the young man advances forward and salutes him. His heart soars aloft, and he is reminded of the importance of humility. The wise Vidura continues, a self-controlled person should first offer a seat to their guest, bring water, cause their feet to be washed, and make the usual inquiries of welcome only. Then should they speak of their own affairs. He emphasized that one's dwelling should be a sanctuary for guests, particularly those from the Brahmanic order. Vidura cautions against associating with individuals who are unworthy, such as physicians who have abandoned their vows or thieves. However, even these individuals deserve respect and hospitality when they arrive as guests. A Brahmana should never be a seller of salt-cooked food, curds, milk, honey, oil clarified, butter, sesame, meat, fruits, roots, others dyed clothes, all kinds of perfumery or treacle. He advises those who embody the qualities of a true Dujin are rare and exceptional. They have mastered their senses, disregard both praise and blame, and remain detached from worldly desires. Vidura describes them as like one perfectly withdrawn from the world. In contrast, those who wrong others should never assume they can escape consequences. The wise sage reminds us that intelligent individuals possess long arms with which to return wrongs, for wrongs done to them. Vidura also emphasize the importance of protecting one's wives and treating them with kindness. Wives that are highly blessed and virtuous, worthy of worship, and the ornaments of their homes are really embodiments of domestic prosperity. He says, as we navigate the complexities of life, Vidura offers guidance on how to cultivate wisdom and power. He advises us to keep our counsel secret, not speaking of what we intend to do until it is done. Ascending a mountain or palace, we should mature our decisions in solitude, away from prying eyes. The wise sage also cautions against entrusting state secrets to friends who lack learning or control over their senses. A king's finances and the keeping of his counsels depend on his minister, so it is essential to examine them well before appointing them. As we strive for greatness, Vidura reminds us that true power comes from living a virtuous life. We should renounce envy, protect others' rights, give what is due to those who deserve it, and be agreeable in speech. Finally, the wise sage concludes with a warning about the dangers of deceitfulness, gift, and harsh speech. Those who possess these qualities will soon find themselves shunned by all creatures, while those who cultivate intelligence, tranquility of mind, self-control, purity, and absence of harsh speech.
In the grand halls of Hastinapura, King Dhritarashtra sat in contemplative silence, his eyes fixed on the wise Vidura. As he began to speak, man Vidura said is like a wooden, dull moved by strings. He is not the master of his own fate, but rather a mere pawn in the game of destiny. Dhritarashtra's interest was piqued, and he leaned forward, his voice filled with anticipation. Go on, I am attentive to what you say. Vidura continued, his words dripping with wisdom. Even the great Vrihaspada himself can be faulted for speaking out of turn. True greatness lies not in words, but in actions. Vidura's eyes seemed to bore into Dhritarashtra's very soul as he spoke of the fleeting nature of human relationships. Those who are agreeable by gift or sweet words may win favor, but it is those with natural charm and humility that truly shine. He paused, his gaze drifting towards Duryodhana, the king's eldest son. O King, Vidura said, his voice tinged with a hint of sorrow, I warned you when Duryodhana was born. I told you to abandon this one son, for by doing so you would secure the prosperity of your 100 sons. He paused again, his eyes locked on Dhritarashtra's face. But if you keep him, destruction will befall your entire lineage. Dhritarashtra's expression remained resolute, his voice Firm all that you say is approved by the wise, and is for my future good. I dare not abandon my son Vidur's eyes seemed to cloud over as if he saw the path of destiny unfolding before him. True greatness lies not in wealth or power, Vidur continued, but in righteousness. He who is graced with every virtue and humility is never indifferent to even the smallest suffering of living creatures. His voice grew stronger, more urgent. Those who are quarrelsome, covetous, shameless, and deceitful should be avoided at all costs. As Vidur spoke his words, but tapestry of wisdom and foresight, he cautioned against the dangers of intoxication, sleep, and inattention to spies, warning that these pitfalls could lead even the wise down a path of ruin. Dhritarashtra listened intently, his face a mask of contemplation. Vidur's words seemed to awaken something deep within him, a sense of responsibility towards his family and his kingdom. O King, Vidur said, his voice filled with conviction, it is your duty to undo the wrongs inflicted on the sons of Pandu. Reinstating them in their rightful place will cleanse you of all your sins and make you an object of worship, even among those who have mastered their souls as the sun dipped below the horizon.
In the court of King Dhritarashtra, Vidur stood as a wise and compassionate advisor. He began by sharing with the king the secrets of success, saying, a good man who pursues his goals without overstepping his limits will soon win fame. He explained that those who are virtuous have the power to bestow happiness on others. Vidur continued, one who forsakes a great goal due to its unrighteousness will live happily, casting off all foes like a snake shedding its skin. He warned against three grave sins: gaining victory through deceit, being insincere towards one's preceptor, and boasting of one's intentions. These, he said, were equal to the sin of slaying a Brahmin. A wise advisor then spoke of the dangers of excessive envy, death, and boastfulness, which can lead to the destruction of prosperity. He also cautioned against carelessness in waiting upon one's preceptor, haste, and boastfulness, for these are the three enemies of knowledge. Vidur listed 7 faults that students must avoid: idleness and attention, confusion of the intellect, restlessness, gathering for killing time, haughtiness, pride, and covetousness. He said that those who desire pleasure cannot have knowledge, and vice versa. Fire is never satisfied with fuel. He explained, and a beautiful woman is never sated with men. The king listened intently as Vidur spoke of the dangers of hope, which can kill patience. Yama, the god of death, who can destroy growth; anger, which can destroy prosperity; and miserliness, which can destroy fame. He also warned against the absence of tending, which can lead to the destruction of capitals. He concluded his lesson. Vidur said, man who has said that certain objects should always be kept in one's house for the worship of the gods: goats, bulls, sandalwood, lyres, mirrors, honey clarified, butter, iron, copper, conch shells, salagram, and goratkana. These, he explained, were auspicious and brought good fortune. Vidur then imparted a sacred lesson that was the highest of all teachings. Virtue should never be forsaken for desire, fear, or temptation. Virtue is everlasting. He said, while pleasure and pain are transitory, life itself is everlasting, but its particular phases are transitory. The wise advisor spoke of the fleeting nature of life, saying that even mighty kings who had ruled over lands abundant with wealth and corn had become victims of the universal destroyer. He explained that when a person dies, only their merits and sins remain with them in the afterlife. Vidur cautioned against the regions of great gloom and darkness, where the senses of man are exceedingly afflicted. Let not any of those places be thine, he said, carefully listening to these. In the tranquil atmosphere of the royal court, Dhritarashtra, the blind king of Hastinapur, sat with his trusted advisor Vidur. The king's eyes gleamed with curiosity as he asked Vidur to share any remaining thoughts or doubts he might have. Of Vidur, known for his wisdom and compassion, smiled gently and replied that there was indeed one more thing he wanted to discuss with the king. He mentioned that the revered sage Sainath Suyeda, a wise and immortal rishi who had dedicated his life to perpetual celibacy, would be able to shed light on the king's deepest concerns. Dhritarashtra's eyes sparkled with anticipation as he asked Vidur if he knew what the sage would say. Vidur hesitated for a moment before explaining that he was born into the Sudra class and therefore felt unworthy to speak on such profound matters. However, he acknowledged that Sanat Sujeta's understanding was infinite and his words carried the weight of divine authority. The king pressed Vidura to reveal how he could meet with the sage, and Vidura began to meditate on the wise one as if in response to Vidura's thoughts. Sanat Sujeta appeared before them. The sage was received with the prescribed rituals, and after resting for a while he sat comfortably. Vidura addressed the sage, explaining that Dhritarashtra had a profound doubt that he could not shake off. He begged the wise one to dispel this darkness and guide the king towards enlightenment. Sanat Sujeta listened attentively before beginning his discourse. King, the sage said, there are two opposing views on death. Some believe it can be averted by specific actions, while others claim that there is no death at all. I shall clarify this for you. Death arises from ignorance, and knowledge is immortality. It is not a devouring force like a tiger. Its form is unascertainable. The sage continued to explain that the pursuit of Brahmavidya, or self-knowledge, was the path to immortality. He described how men are swayed by their desires, which lead them down the path of ignorance and ultimately to death. However, those who conquer their souls through self-restraint can escape this phase. And Sujeta's words painted a vivid picture. Ignorance assumes the form of Yama, but it cannot devour that learned man who has controlled his desires in this manner. That man who follows his desires is destroyed along with them. He, however, that can renounce desire can certainly drive away all kinds of woe. Sage's discourse was a gentle yet powerful breeze that swept through the king's mind, dispelling his doubts and fears. Dhritarashtra listened intently as Sanat Sujeta revealed the nature of death. It is not an external force, but rather the culmination of ignorance. A king then asked about the path to liberation.
In the tranquil surroundings of a forest hermitage, Dhritarashtra, the wise king, sat in contemplation with his revered guest Sanat Sujeta. The king's curiosity was piqued as he sought to understand the true essence of asceticism. Mauna. He asked, what is the object of asceticism of the two kinds of mauna, restraining speech and meditation? Which one do you approve? Sanat Sujeta, a sage with profound wisdom, gazed at the king with piercing eyes. He replied, the supreme soul cannot be penetrated by both the Vedas and the mind. It is for this reason that it is called mauna, that from which both the Vedic syllabum and ordinary sounds have arisen. That one, O king, is displayed as the word. Dhritarashtra's eyes widened with wonder as he asked, is one who knows both the Rig and Yajas Vedas, or the Samaveda, sullied by sins when they commit them? Sanat Sujeta's words dripped like honey as he replied, I tell you truly that a man who has not restrained his senses is not rescued from sinful acts by either the Sama or Rig or Yajas Veda. The Vedas never rescue one who lives by deceit. The king's brow furrowed in concern as he asked, although that hast restrained these senses, if indeed the Vedas are not competent to rescue a person without the aid of virtue, whence then is this delusion of the Brahmanas, that the Vedas are always destructive of sins? Sanat Sujeta's countenance shone with compassion as he explained, the universe has sprung from the supreme soul by the union of conditions respecting name, form, and other attributes. The Vedas also point it out, duly declaring the same and inculcating that the supreme soul and the universe are different and not Ida Takalas. The sun began to set, casting a warm orange glow over the forest. Sanat Sujeta continued, it is for attaining to that supreme soul that asceticism and sacrifices are ordained, and it is by these two that the man of learning earneth virtue, destroying sin by virtue. His soul is enlightened by knowledge. The king listened intently as Sanat Sujeta revealed the mysteries of the universe. The next day Dhritarashtra returned to his guest with a new question. O Sanat Sujeta, how can ascetic austerities, which are all of the same kind, be sometimes successful and sometimes unsuccessful? The sage's eyes sparkled with insight as he replied, that asceticism which is not stained by faults is said to be capable of procuring emancipation, and is therefore successful, while the asceticism that is stained by vanity and want of true devotion is regarded unsuccessful. As the conversation unfolded
in the presence of Dhritarashtra, a revered king and seeker of truth, the wise Rishi Sanat Sujeta began to expound upon the mysteries of Brahm and the ultimate reality. that underlies all existence. The king's eyes sparkled with joy as he asked the sage to continue sharing his profound knowledge. Your words are like a refreshing stream, O noble Rishitretereshtra, said, untainted by worldly desires, rare among men. Pray, tell me more about the attainment of Brahmins. And Atsuyita smiled benevolently and began, a great king, the knowledge of Brahman is not something to be grasped hastily. It requires a deep understanding cultivated through the practice of Brahmacharya, the restraint of one's senses and the merging of the will with pure intellect only. Then can one attain the state of utter absence of worldly thought, which is but a stepping stone towards knowledge. Dhritarashtra's curiosity was piqued. How does this knowledge manifest itself? Does it require effort, or is it simply revealed? And Atsuyeta's eyes twinkled with wisdom as he replied, though residing within the mind, the knowledge of Brahman remains unmanifest until aided by the pure intellect and Brahmacharya. It is through these practices that one becomes aware of their true nature. The king's interest was now fully engaged. Tell me, O wise Rishi, what is the essence of this Brahmacharya? How can I attain it without much difficulty? And Atsuyeta leaned forward, his voice taken on a gentle yet firm tone. Those who reside in their preceptors' abodes win their goodwill and friendship and practice Brahmacharya austerities, become even in this world the embodiments of Brahman. They cast off their bodies and are united with the Supreme. So as the sage continued to expound upon the virtues of Brahmacharya, Dhritarashtra listened intently, his mind drinking in the wisdom like a parched traveler at an oasis. Brahmacharya, saying that Atsuyeta explained, is not merely a practice, but a way of life. It is the 12 virtues that constitute its essence: ahimsa, non-violence; sayya, truthfulness; asteya, non-stealing; Brahmacharya, itself a parigraha, detachment from worldly possessions; swadhyaya, self-study; tapas, austerity; svadhyaya, the study of the Vedas; Ishvara pranidhana, devotion to the Supreme Dhamma, control over one's senses; and sraddha, faith. It is through these virtues that one becomes a true yogin, attaining knowledge of Brahman. As the sage concluded his discourse, Dhritarashtra felt as though he had been transported to a realm beyond the mundane world. He, in a serene and tranquil saying, Atsuyeta, a wise sage, sat in contemplation with King Sibai, imparting ancient wisdom on the path to righteousness. Your Majesty, he began, there are 12 grave faults that can destroy men's lives: sorrow, anger, covetousness, lust, ignorance, laziness, malice, self-importance, continuous desire of gain, affection, jealousy, and evil speech. These vices wait for opportunities to seize mankindness. The sage spoke his words, woof, a tapestry of caution against the destructive nature of these faults. He who is covetous, fierce, harsh of speech, garrulous, given to nursing anger, or boastful, cannot treat others with courtesy. When wealth is obtained, he paused as if allowing the weight of his words to settle upon the king's hearts, and Atsuyeta then revealed the virtues that guide a righteous life: righteousness, truth, asceticism, self-restraint, contentment, modesty, renunciation, love of others, gift, acquaintance with the Scriptures, patience, and forgiveness. These 12 are the practices of a Brahmana. His voice rose in emphasis as he declared, he who does not fall off from these 12 may sway the entire earth. In a gentle yet firm tone, the sage cautioned against the dangers of meda, or excessive attachment to worldly desires. He listed its 18 faults: ill will towards others, throwing obstacles in the way of virtuous acts, detraction, falsehood in speech, lust, anger, dependence, speaking ill of others, finding out the faults of others for report, wasted of wealth, quarrel, insolence, cruelty to living creatures, malice, ignorance, disregard of those who are worthy of regard, loss of the senses of right and wrong, and always seeking to injure others. And Atsuyeta's eyes seemed to hold a deep wisdom as he continued, a wise man should not give way to meda, for its accompaniments are censurable. He turned his attention to the qualities of true friendship, delighting in friends' prosperity, distress at their adversity, giving away what is dear, but should not be asked for, sacrificing one's own good for a friend, not dwelling in the house of a friend on whom everything has been bestowed, and enjoying what one earns oneself. As the sage concluded his teachings, he spoke of the path to attaining Brahman, the man of wealth who seeks to acquire those good qualities, and becomes charitable and righteous, restraineth his 5 senses from their respective objects. This restraint of the senses is asceticism, which, when it grows in degree, can win regions of bliss. Hereafter, a moment of profound insight, Sanatsuyeda, revealed that truth resides in him who knows Brahman as vested with attributes, and more completely in him who knows Bra. In the depths of existence there lies a seed called Mahesa, pure and unblemished. It shines with an effulgence that illuminates, all guiding the senses and giving rise to the radiant Surya. This eternal one endowed with divinity is beheld by yogins through their mental eye. Its light and heat are self-sustaining, not derived from any external source. Sees the seed enters luminous bodies, it grants them illumination and warmth. It is an object of awe to all luminous entities, a reminder of its boundless power. The Eternal One unfolds both the creature's soul and Eswara, allowing them to function in consciousness during waking hours. However, during sleep and dissolution, they are deprived of this awareness. Brahman, the ultimate reality, is never bereft of consciousness. It sustains the entire universe, encompassing the earth, heaven, and all directions. The seat gives rise to the 5 elements, rivers, seas, and even the points of the compass. Its presence pervades every aspect of existence. A body like a chariot is destined for destruction, yet its actions are eternal, tied to the wheels of past deeds. The senses guide the individual towards the increate and unchangeable one. Those who behold this supreme soul through their mental faculties become freed from death's grasp. The stream of illusion with 12 fruits flows from the seed. Men swim in its waters, beholding many sweet things along the way. However, they are only able to enjoy half of the rewards of their actions in the next world. The creature soul, which is also Eswara, pervades everything and has ordained sacrifice. Souls free from accidents resort to Avidya, a tree-like entity with golden foliage. They assume various forms according to their propensities and take birth in different orders. These souls are united within the Eternal One, who is beheld by yogins through their mental eye accidents, which arise from Brahman, raise the universe from its fullness. Conversely, when these accidents are dispelled, Brahman remains in its fullness. The seed gives rise to the 5 elements and holds the power to control them. He is also the source of the consumer and consumed, as well as living organisms with senses. The vital air, called apana, is swallowed by prana. Prana is absorbed by the will, and the will is taken in by the intellect. The intellect, in turn, is enveloped by the Supreme Soul. This process is like a swan treading above an unfathomable scene with one leg hidden deep. The Supreme Controller, worthy of reverential hymns, moves to and fro within the universe. It is the prime cause of everything and manifests as knowledge in creature souls. Fools alone are unable to behold this eternal one among individuals. There are those who...
The night had passed, and the grand hall was abuzz with excitement. The princes and chiefs of the Karaba kingdom had gathered in anticipation of the return of Sanjaya, their trusted envoy to the Pandavas. As the morning sun cast its golden rays upon the hall, the kings and nobles entered with joyful hearts, eager to hear the message from Partha's cap. The hall itself was a marvel of beauty, adorned with a golden floor that shone like the sun and sprinkled with sandal water to create an intoxicating aroma. The seats were arranged in tiers made of gold with marble and ivory, each one wrapped in exquisite covers. It was as if the very gods had descended upon the mortal realm. At the head of this gathering stood Dhritarashtra, his eyes shining with expectation. Beside him stood Bhishmadrona, Kripasalya, and Kritavarman, their faces stern and resolute. Jayadratha, Aswatthama, Vaikarna, Samadata, Valaka, Vidura, and Yutsul, the great car warrior, all took their places among the assembly of heroic kings. As the orderlies in waiting announced the arrival of Sanjaya's son, a murmur of excitement rippled through the hall. The Sudha himself emerged from his chariot adorned with earrings that sparkled like stars in the morning light. With a dignified stride he entered the grand hall where the high-souled kings awaited him. Sanjaya began to speak, his voice clear and measured. Ye Kauravas, I bring tidings from the Pandavas, having gone to them from this place. As instructed by Dhritarashtra, I have returned with a message of virtue and profit. The assembly leaned forward, their eyes fixed upon Sanjaya's face. eager to hear every word, the sons of Pandu offered their congratulations to all the Kuras, according to their age. Sanjaya continued. They saluted the aged ones, those equal in years, and the younger ones, as each should be saluted according to his years. The hall fell silent as if the very breath of the kings had been sucked out of them as Sanjaya. Pause, the rustling sound echoed through the hall like the fluttering of wings. It was Duryodhana, the wrathful king of the Kuras, who rose from his seat, his eyes blazing with intensity. The assembly watched him, their faces tense with anticipation, as he prepared to hear the words that would seal the fate of the Pandavas and the Kauravas. Alike the air was heavy with expectation, as if the very fabric of destiny was about to be woven into Sanjaya's words hung in the balance, a delicate thread that would either. In the midst of the gathering of kings, Dhritarashtra turned to his trusted advisor Sanjaya and asked, "Tell me, O Sanjaya, what words did Dhananjaya, that mighty warrior, speak in my presence?" Sanjaya, with a hint of reverence, began to recount the words of Arjuna. "I was present when Arjuna spoke thus," Sanjaya said, "with Yudhishthira's sanction, and in the hearing of Kesava. He declared, if Dhritarashtra's son does not surrender to King Yudhishthira, then it is evident that there must be some sinful act committed by the sons of Dhritarashtra, whose consequences are yet unreaped." He spoke with conviction, his eyes ablaze like the lotus flower. Arjuna continued, "If you desire war with Bhimasena and me and the Aswins and Vasudeva and Sinai's son and Drishtadyumna, who is infallible in arms, and Saikandan, then all objects of the Pandavas will be accomplished. Do not propose peace for the sons of Pandu, but have war. If you like as Sanjaya spoke, the assembly fell silent, their eyes fixed on Duryodhana's face. Arjuna's words were like a blazing fire, burning away the complacency that had taken hold of Dhritarashtra's son. Arjuna's prophecy was not just a warning, it was a promise of what was to come. He spoke of Bhimasena, his mace in hand, vomiting the venom of his wrath like an angry snake. He spoke of Nakula, dexterously shooting arrows by hundreds, mangling the car warriors of Duryodhana. The assembly shuddered at the thought of Yudhishthira's wrath, a fire that would consume the Dhritarashtra host by glance alone of his eye. They trembled at the mention of Nakula, who had slept on the bed of woe in the woods, and now vowed to vomit the poison of his wrath like an angry snake. Is Sanjaya continued to recount Arjuna's words. The assembly fell silent once more. Duryodhana's face was pale, his eyes fixed on the ground, as if he could see the consequences of his actions unfolding before him. The assembly knew that war was inevitable. They saw in Arjuna's words a glimpse of what was to come, the slaughter, the carnage, and the devastation, and they knew that Duryodhana would repent for this war just as Arjuna had prophesied. As Sanjaya finished speaking, the assembly fell silent once more. The weight of Arjuna's words hung in the air, a reminder of what was to come. In the midst of the gathered kings, Bhishma, son of Santanu, spoke words of great import to Duryodhana. He began by recounting a tale from ancient times, when Brihaspati and Sakra, accompanied by the celestial gods and goddesses, had sought out Brahma to inquire about two mysterious figures known as Nara and Narayana. These two beings, it was said, were of immense power and beauty, their ascetic merit radiating like a beacon in the heavens. They dwelled in the realm of Brahman, having arrived from another world, and by their actions brought joy to the world. The gods and Gandharvas worshipped them, but they existed solely for the destruction of Sakra. Accompanied by Brihaspati and the celestial host, sought out Nara and Narayana to request their aid in a time of great turmoil, for the gods and Asuras were at war, and Sakra begged the two ancient deities to grant him a boon. Nara and Narayana agreed, and with their help Sakra vanquished the deities. And Dhanavasvishma continued his tale, explaining that these two beings, Nara and Narayana, were none other than Arjuna and Krishna, united in purpose and action. They were born from a single soul, but lived separate lives, each contributing to the greater good of the world. Their mission was to fight for justice and righteousness. As Bhishma spoke, Karna rose to defend himself against the elder's words. He claimed to be a true Kshatriya, devoted to his duties without faltering what wickedness could be attributed to him. He had never harmed Dhritarashtra's son, nor will he ever betray his king or his people. Bhishma countered Karna's boasts, saying that the Sudha son was not equal to even a 16th part of the Pandavas in valor and might. The great calamity that was about to befall Duryodhana's sons was in fact brought on by Karna's own actions. He had relied on this wretch, son of a Sota, who had insulted the heroes of celestial descent just then. The high-souled son of Bharadwaja, Drulla, spoke up, urging Dhritarashtra to make peace with the Pandavas before war broke out. He knew that Arjuna's words would come true, for there was no Bauman equal to him in all the three worlds. But the king refused to listen, and instead asked Sanjaya about the Pandavas. From that moment on, the Kauravas gave up all hope of life, knowing that their fate was sealed. The sun was setting over the kingdom of Hastinapura, casting a golden glow over the assembled Kuras. Dhritarashtra, the blind king, sat on his throne, eager to know the thoughts of his charioteer Sanjaya. "Tell me, Sanjaya," he said, "what did the Pandava king, Yudhishthira, say after hearing about our army? And how is he acting, considering the coming war?" Sanjaya stood before him, his eyes cast downward in reverence. "Your Majesty," he began, "all the Panchalas and other sons of Pandu are looking up to Yudhishthira's face, seeking his guidance. They come with their armies ready to